A reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verses 1 through 19. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We'll go with you." They went out, got in the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to them, "Children, have you no fish caught?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you'll find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there, with fish on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you've caught." Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. Though there were so many in the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he had raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And he said to them, "Yes, Lord, I know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Then tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him, "This is the third time. Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten the belt around you and take you where you don't wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me."
Well, I walked in this morning and I was reminded that I would not have my pulpit today. Good morning again, church. And so the suggestions came to me that I could preach from the boat and that might be kind of fun. Or perhaps that Romper the river otter could preach, and that would be, better than it's ever been before, maybe. But no. I'll be just fine right here. We are kind of ambidextrous today, if you will, because today, indeed, we're celebrating the amazing week we had at Vacation Bible School, and also we are continuing through this series that we've been in all summer about the story of God. We're tracking all the way through the entire Bible, hitting the 100 essential passages of the Bible, the greatest hits, if you will, and we are 10 Sundays into that. So after this, we just have 2 more Sundays, and as we go into the New Testament here, beyond the Gospels, we are going to preach on some of these major figures in the earliest Christian church, on Peter today and next week on Paul, before we wrap it all up on August the 12th and reflect on what this book really is and what role it has in our lives as Christians. So all along through this summer, we've been catching themes that build throughout Scripture. Themes about a God who is far more reliable and faithful to us than we are to God. Themes like the tenacity of that God, the unwillingness to just part ways from a stubborn people when they walk away from God. Themes about a God who continues to use not just regular people, but really, if we're honest, really kind of subpar people in all sorts of ways. God uses them to accomplish this incredible thing of bringing greater and greater glimpses, greater and greater bits of heaven to earth. And that's exactly where we find Peter today. Peter, Petros, if you prefer the Greek, Cephas, if you prefer the Aramaic, the original language. Just this week in our Vacation Bible School story station, we heard about the story when Jesus discovered Peter. His name was Simon then, along with his brother Andrew. They were casting their nets in the sea, and so some of the children got to sit in a boat and to cast their nets into the sea. They were doing perhaps the thing that they loved, the thing that they thought they were made to do. And it took just this one line, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." I don't know, maybe they didn't love it that much, actually, because that's all it took. They walked away right then and there. They didn't put up any argument at all. It wasn't one of those, "but let me go and do this first." They just walked away. No explanation. In the Gospel of John, which we just read from, when Jesus meets Peter, we find that Jesus changed his name from Simon to Peter right then and there. That first time that he met him. The first time that they met, the first encounter that this guy had with Jesus, and his name was changed. I think that a lot of us can relate to that. I had a pretty profound encounter with Christ when I was in my early teenage years, and I know that for me it felt as if something really fundamental in my life had changed, kind of like a name change. But it's hard to say if that was really true. Through all of the ups and downs and the ins and outs of my faith over the years that followed that, the years after that, the decades that followed, that have led me up to now, the feeling that started with that one encounter, that feeling that something in me had really immediately changed, like changing my name, had kind of faded over time. I wonder if the same thing is true for Peter. This name that Jesus gives him, Peter, it means stone or rock. So we might call him Rocky or the Rock, depending on your generation and preference in movies. But the truth is that Rocky really best describes this path, this river ride, if you will, that Peter travels on as a disciple of Christ. This week we talked about our lives as followers of Christ being like this great river adventure that we are on with God, and sometimes there is rough water and sometimes it is smooth sailing. Every time I read about Peter in the Gospels, I think, you got to hand it to him. Peter is so gutsy. He doesn't do anything halfway. When he is in full stop, full speed ahead. In the river raft, Peter would be the guy who, headed into the rapids, is at the front of the boat going, "I'm the king of the world." He's all the way in. And in fact, Peter, one episode in a boat, Peter sees Jesus out there walking on the water, and his knee-jerk reaction is, "Oh, me too. Tell me to come to you on the water. I want to do that too." Who does that? I mean, When we talk about Jesus walking on water, it kind of means that he is something special, that this is something that only Jesus can do, not everybody else can do. So what kind of audacious bull in a china shop thinks that he's got what it takes to jump out of that boat and onto the water with Jesus? And then we all know how that went. Really well for a second. And then, oh, ye of little faith, why did you doubt? As he is sinking and gasping. Peter jumps right in later on again when Jesus asks his disciples, who do people say that I am? And they respond, we talked about this just a couple of weeks ago. They respond, well, John the Baptist or Elijah. Some say that you're a prophet. But what about you, Jesus asks? Who do you say I am? And there's Peter again with his hand up in the air. Ooh, me, pick me. You are the Messiah, the Son of God. And it is this great moment of victory for Peter. He gets it. When nobody else seems to get it, Peter gets it. And Jesus showers affirmation on him. You are Peter, the rock. I chose your name correctly because on you I will build my church. You will hold the keys to the kingdom. And then 5 little verses later, Peter has gone from the highest high to the lowest low again when Jesus commands him, get behind me, Satan. It's a rough ride for Peter. Then all at once, in the next scene, Peter is headed up the mountain with Jesus and John to go and to experience Jesus transfigured right before his very eyes at the mountaintop. Up and down, up and down, up and down. This is Peter's rocky road, rocky river ride. So imagine with me. Imagine yourself in Peter's shoes. You have followed and worshiped Jesus for some years, riding this up and down road, and then things turn really bad. All of the things that Jesus kept on saying, the things that you heard that made you uncomfortable, that you didn't want to believe that he would suffer at the hands of the chief priests and the elders, all of those things actually began to unfold, and it was worse than you could have imagined. And you wonder, was I wrong about this guy? Did I just throw myself in on something without thinking it through, like jumping out of a boat to walk on water? And then you find yourself gathered around a charcoal fire, denying that you ever even knew him, much less followed him. And then you hear it. The rooster crows off in the distance, just like he said it would. And you're left in silence with your guilt, 3 times denied. Then, 3 days later, you hear that he, in fact, is not dead, that he is alive again. And rather than a feeling of overwhelming joy, you start to think, well, what now? It's hard enough to live with guilt hanging over us, but it is something different, something more, to live in that unexpected moment when you find yourself face to face with the very person that you have just betrayed, the very one that you've denied. In that last scene that we read this morning, Peter jumps out of the boat into the sea. Did you notice that he puts on his clothes first and then jumps into the water? I always thought that was weird. But then it's Peter, right? So it's kind of in character. So he flings himself toward Jesus, toward the shore. Jesus has already appeared to his disciples a couple of times, but to our knowledge, Jesus and Peter have not spoken about the denial incident. Peter has not acknowledged or confessed his failure, and Jesus has not convicted him about it. So I wonder what Peter was thinking then. I imagine that he wondered, does he know? Will he forgive me? I crumbled so easily. Can I still be the rock that he believed that I was? Jesus, if I have failed you once, are you going to want to have anything to do with me now? The question that Jesus had asked Peter way back when was, who do you say that I am? Now in this moment at the sea, with Jesus on the shore and Peter in the boat, even as that rooster's crow is still ringing in his ears, I imagine that the question scrolling through Peter's mind, the question he's asking himself now is, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to be a follower of Christ? You who once were so great, so close with Jesus, so ready to drop everything and follow at one request, to learn a different kind of fishing, to devote your life to this kingdom that he proclaimed. What you got now? You walked away, slinked away in the dark, pretending, lying, as if you never knew him. The keys to the kingdom, where are those keys now? How can you even show your face to him? And yet this is what Jesus does. Jesus gives and Jesus invites. Jesus meets Peter and the other disciples on the shore, and he's already making breakfast for them. He's already providing. The fire's going, the coals are hot. He's got fish and bread already on the grill. It's the closest thing that we get to communion in all of the Gospel of John. But Jesus has not laid out everything that is needed for this feast. He invites them to offer something too. Bring some of the fish that you caught, to contribute what they have and perhaps what they are, all that they have brought to this final encounter with him on the shore. Jesus gives. He gives them provision, sustenance for the journey that lies ahead of them. And he invites them to give also, for them to bring what they've got, to join it with what the Lord has provided. Perhaps this is what Jesus has invited us to do as well. Having given us the basics, what we need, grace for what lies ahead of us in our future, Jesus invites us to bring what we've got, fish of our own, in the form of our time, our compassion, our talent, our money, our prayers, to join these gifts with what God has already given to us. Jesus gives and Jesus invites. And then Jesus pulls Peter aside. Okay, it doesn't say that he actually pulls him aside, but he points his face directly to Peter, to Simon, to Rocky. And it's the moment we've been waiting for. Face to face, tete-a-tete, mano y mano. Mano y, what's the word for God? Deo, mano y Deo. And sure enough, the words that fall from Jesus' lips are not what Peter has feared. He doesn't furrow his brow and point his finger and shout, "Who do you think you are?" denying me. But rather softly and tenderly, "Peter, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" 3 times. And just as Peter broke under that third denial, Peter breaks again over the third affirmation. "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus gives restoration, forgiveness, grace, the chance to share in resurrection and new life, so that Peter isn't just left wallowing in the wake of this triple denial. Jesus shows up instead on the shore of his life, and he shares the gift of resurrection with him. A new chance, a renewed relationship, sealed by that repetition again. 3 times denied, 3 times affirmed. Jesus gives, and then Jesus invites. Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. Jesus does not forgive Peter and then just leave him there. Jesus still has work for this rock to do. Peter's forgiveness and his commissioning, his sending out, are all wrapped up into one moment, because in order to carry out the life and the ministry that is before him, Peter has to be restored and transformed. Friends, transformed people transform the world. Those who have been forgiven and restored go on to share forgiveness, and they wreak restoration on the world. People who have encountered the risen Christ again and again through ups and downs as they ride this river of life, when they are walking on water and then when they are sinking like a rock, those who have stood around the charcoal fire and denied him, whether by their lips or by our lives, we are invited around the charcoal fire again, around a meal of grace, to encounter Jesus, to be forgiven and restored. These are the ones who go on to be the bedrock, the foundation of the church, a church that is, as we know, just as flawed as Peter was. A church that has, over the centuries, has had just as rocky of a ride as Peter did. But a church that continues to gather around the meal of forgiveness and reconciliation and restoration, where we encounter Jesus again, where we are forgiven and restored, and where we are sent out again on this adventure with God. So, Rafters, the adventure is before us. God has promised that God is always, always with us. And Jesus gives us what we need, invites us to give what we have, and so we receive and we go. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.